Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning, dear friends, or good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is for you when you see this. This is the Friday morning program at the Empty Cloud Monastery, and we are continuing the conversation we started yesterday about the Rathavinītasutta, usually translated as the Relay Chariots, number 24 in the Middle Length Discourses of the Buddha. Yesterday, we spoke about the background story and about the bhikkhu who is giving this teaching, his life and his excellence as a Dhamma teacher. Today, we're going to go into the 7 stages of purification that are spelled out by Bhikkhu Puna Mantani Putta, Puna, the son of Mantani. The map that I have here is showing where this sutta happened. These are the places of the Buddha's early career. At the very top of this half circle, semicircle, is Savatthi. And then going clockwise, the next place is Kapilavatthu. This was the place where Venerable the Arahanta Puna was dwelling. And then continuing around the semicircle, near the bottom, it comes to Rajagaha, Velavana, which is the place of the bamboo grove. So Venerable Puna had sent his 500 enlightened disciples to pay respects to the Buddha while they were staying down here at Rajagaha. But at that time, Puna did not go along and did not see the Buddha. Puna has never seen the Buddha or met the majority of the Buddha's disciples. The only disciple that he has met is Ayyā Kondanya, who is the first bhikkhu to have been ordained by the Buddha just after the Dhamma Sutta, and he ordained Puna, and then went off to the forest to practice. Puna stayed there in Kapilavatthu and practiced, attained his enlightenment. Had 500 disciples to come from that city, ordain them, train them until they all became arahants. They went to Rajagaha. And at that point, within the present sutta, the disciples speak about the excellence of the Arahant Puna as a teacher of the Dhamma. And Venerable Sariputta happens to hear that conversation and forms the desire to see Puna. Sometime later, we could say at the end of the Vasa, the Buddha and his disciples goes back up to Savatthi. And while he's staying there at Savatthi, the Arahant Puna decides this is the right time, and he travels to Savatthi to see the Buddha. Puna put his lodgings in order, took his bowl and robe, went to Savatthi. Eventually he came there, he went to the Buddha, bowed, sat to one side. The Buddha educated, encouraged, fired up, and inspired him with a Dhamma talk. And this was a Dhamma talk about the 10 types of skillful speech for a Dhamma teacher. Then, having approved, rejoiced, agreed with what the Buddha said, Puna got up from his seat, respectfully circled the Buddha, and went to the dark forest for the day's meditation. Then a certain monk went up to Venerable Sariputta, said, Sariputta, this bhikkhu named Puna, of whom you have so often spoken so highly, after being inspired by talk of the Buddha, went to the dark forest for the day's abiding. Sariputta quickly grabbed his sitting cloth and followed behind Puna, keeping sight of his head. Puna plunged deep into the dark forest, sat at the root of a tree for the day's meditation. Sariputta did likewise. Then, in the late afternoon, Sariputta came out of retreat, went to Puna, and exchanged greeting with him. When the greetings were over and polite conversation over, they went to one side and asked his question. So if you ever have a chance to encounter an arahant or a highly realized Dhamma teacher, if you had a chance, you might have an opportunity to offer their alms food in the morning. And then after having offered the alms meal, they would go someplace for meditation. And if you were very fortunate, you might have a chance to go and to sit nearby and to spend the full day in meditation. Then later in the day, as the late afternoon is going on towards evening, that would be the right time to approach the teacher and to ask a Dhamma question or to invite the teaching. You don't need to ask a specific question. You can go and simply say, Venerable, if you would kindly teach me the Dhamma in brief, then I will go and practice alone with that Dhamma, making the effort to practice and realize. And that's a very respectful way of doing it also. Now, in this case, Puna has never met Sariputta. He doesn't know that it's Sariputta. Apparently, according to Analayo's theory, Sariputta is not initially presenting himself as being another disciple of the Buddha. He is just presenting himself as being some random samana, a forest dweller, a seeker, a spiritual seeker. So this must have been before the Buddha had determined the particular pattern of the patchwork robe that was used by the monks. So early on in the Buddha's teaching, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the difference by looking at the robe between a disciple of the Buddha and any other disciple. They would all be wearing similar kind of rag robes in brownish colors, depending on what kind of dye is available in that region. So he's approaching, seeming to be not a disciple of the Buddha. And he says, Avuso, friend, is our spiritual life lived under the Buddha? Yes. He asked, is the spiritual life lived under the Buddha for the sake of purification of ethics? Certainly not. Well, is the spiritual life lived for the sake of purification of mind? Certainly not. Is the spiritual life lived under the Buddha for the sake of purification of view? Certainly not. So far in these 3 stages, you have purification of ethics is upholding the precepts that one has undertaken. Becoming accomplished in ethics is realizing to the point that one's ethical precepts are so deeply integrated into one's personality that it would be impossible to commit a major fault. And one's ethical behavior is natural, intuitive, and easy. That would be purification of ethics. Then the purification of mind, this is called Citta Visuddhi. So this is almost a synonym of Citta Bhavana, or a cultivation of the mind, which means meditation. So the practice of meditation, which results of the being able to at least temporarily relinquish the defilements of the mind, relinquishing sensual craving, relinquishing the hindrances, and entering into a state of purity which is somewhat stable and secluded from those negative mental patterns. That's the purification of the mind. And then the purification of the view, that would be called samadhi. So in this stage, because the mind has become bright, pliable, open, based on the ethics and the meditation, that one would be capable of understanding, having an initial understanding of the Four Noble Truths or of the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. Just like a cloth that was not greasy, not dirty, not stained, but had been well washed and had been treated to take away the grease and dirt, that cloth would be able to absorb the dye and to pick up, solidly pick up and absorb the color. Those of us who have experimented with dyeing have found how it's so interesting to see that some cloth takes the dye really well and some cloth doesn't take the dye. So if you put 3 different kinds of cloth into the dye bath and give them exactly the same treatment and bring them out, one of them will have a really full, intense, saturated color because it's really picked up the dye. So this is what the purification of view is, in my explanation. These are kind of like universal. We see them in many places in the other suttas. These other teachings are somewhat unusual in the sense we don't see them in a lot of places in the suttas as purifications. Nevertheless, Sariputta asks, well, is the spiritual life lived under the Buddha for the sake of purification by traversing doubt? Certainly not. So when one has realized the fruits of awakening, you have that irreversible, direct experience of what you have gained, and you won't be able to fall back again. In that case, to whatever extent you've realized something, not able to fall back, then you would not again be able to be falling into doubt. But if you haven't had that realization, but it's just something, an insight that you saw, that you experienced in meditation, or some inspiration that you felt while listening to a Dhamma talk, that while you're listening to the talk or while you're practicing meditation, it seems to be so perfectly clear, so crystal clear, you feel like you absolutely understand it. And then when you go away and go back home, go back to your family, go out into the workplace, and somebody does something mean to you, or they cut you off in traffic, or something happens that creates an upset, and you're able to lose what you gained. And then actually the conventional way of thinking is able to pop back in again and take over the mind. So one can, in a conventional way, I think in terms of, I have to protect myself. I got what's good for me. This is mine. Don't take what's mine. So in that case, if you fell back, then the doubts could arise. The thing that you thought you understood, you fell back and doubts arise. You haven't traversed doubt yet. So traversing doubt, I'm not speaking about the technical meaning given the commentary. I'm just speaking from common sense, what these stages would mean. And I'm going to answer, certainly not. Suprata asks, is the spiritual life lived under the Buddha for the sake of purification of knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path? Certainly not. So my common sense understanding of this is there are ways that a person who already has heard the Dhamma and pondered and thought about the Dhamma, purified their ethics, and practiced meditation, could still slip into some kind of misunderstanding, some deluded thinking. In particular, the example that's given is if someone has had an experience with jhana, and it's such an outstanding experience, and it's so different from the ordinary mind, that then they think that this is enlightenment, and craving arises in them for jhana or for any of the other types of meditation. And they grasp after the blissful state or after the state of abiding in this kind of meditation, including the four jhanas or the realm of infinite space, infinite consciousness, etc. All of the different elevated states of meditation. So you could say, in another modern terminology, there's something called spiritual materialism, where somebody believes that they've gained something through this practice, and then they want to grasp after their accomplishment and make that into a secure home. The mind becomes attached to what their accomplishment is. That's not the path. What is the path is letting go completely. So being confused about what's the path and what's not the path, is that the purpose? That's not the purpose. Then is the spiritual life lived under the Buddha for the sake of purification of knowledge and vision of the practice. So the practice is called patipada. The practice is the entirety of the Buddha's teaching, which is manifested in how a person lives their actions of body, speech, and mind, how they think, their deportment, the entire life. So up above the purification of view could possibly be held by someone who has not yet made a full commitment to fully live the Eightfold Noble Path. But cognitively, they got a hold of it. So they can cognize that they got the right view. They understand the Eightfold Noble Path, but they've not yet made the determination to live the Eightfold Noble Path. So living the Eightfold Noble Path is the patipada. And then the knowledge and vision, this is something called jnana dasana. We see this expression as a special kind of knowing. So jnana means knowing. Perhaps that means more like cognitive knowing. And then dasana is seeing. And perhaps that means more like experiential, more like a direct experience. So both experiencing directly and fully knowing what's being experienced, combining that together is the jnana dasana. So when the Buddha became enlightened, it very frequently speaks about his way of knowing when he became enlightened is referred to with this term jnana dasana. So this is the first jnana dasana, is knowing the whole path, the whole patipada. Is that the purpose? No, certainly not. And then he says, is the spiritual life lived under the Buddha for the sake of purification of knowledge and vision? So this is, don't worry about the Eightfold Path, just fully know the truth about reality the way it is. No, that's not it. Sariputta says, when asked each of these questions, you answered certainly not. Then what exactly is the purpose of leading the spiritual life under the Buddha? And here is the main thing to learn. The purpose of leading the spiritual life under the Buddha is extinguishment by not grasping. Extinguishment is nibbana, and not grasping is anupada. When one is along the path, not yet there, it could be that these words are only words and we only have got some kind of a general idea of what that signifies. Or perhaps we've caught a glimpse. Or perhaps we've met somebody who has what we want. and you can see the manifestation in a human being about what a person would look like, how they would think, how they would act, how they would speak, if they have come to this extinguishment by not grasping. Or if you have the mind which is able to do this by connecting with the Dhamma as it was handed down through the ages, through the teaching, through the written Dhamma that's been handed down with as much purity as we can, and also through the personal handing down from teacher to student, through the ages of what this means. If you can't see it, you need to go back, climb down the ladder until you get to the point where you feel comfortable saying, yes, I can solidly say, I definitely know this step of the ladder is solid for me. And so then that would be where to do the work. Now it comes to a philosophical discussion, which I'm going to summarize. He's asking again regarding each one of these 7 steps. Is that the same thing as extinguishment by not grasping? No, it's not the same thing. And so how to understand it? So the purification of ethics is something that still has fuel for grasping. It's not yet the goal. And the Buddha would say something that still has fuel for grasping, still has upadana, cannot be the same thing as nibbana. So it's not the same thing, but it's also not separate from nibbana. It's not the same as nibbana, and it's not separate from nibbana. And how is that explained? It's explained with the simile of the relay chariot. We could say in American terminology, the Pony Express. Do you know how the Pony Express worked? So the man wants to deliver the mail, and he there's stations along the way, and he jumps on the first pony and gallops along at a fast clip till he gets to the next station, and then he jumps off his pony, gets a cup of coffee, and races on the next stage, and keeps going like that through several different stages until the last pony takes him to the destination. So that's the simile of the 7 chariots, and it's given in terms of King Pasenadi, who wants to come to a destination. So in the same way, purification of ethics is only for the sake of purification of mind. Purification of mind only for the sake of purification of view. So here again, we see this is a type of a gradual training. It's a kind of a ladder. Each step is the support to get a hold of the next step. So it doesn't always happen for everybody in exactly the same order that's prescribed. Nevertheless, it can be like counterproductive or fruitless to try to jump 5 steps ahead and try to practice with some higher practice without having well established in a foundation. If you I'm going to review briefly this is my we looked at some different patterns of practice. We looked at the gradual training, where a monk, here's our person, here's the Dhamma. They abandon the home life. They perfect their sila. They may practice the boundless loving kindness and the Brahmaviharas. They relinquish the hindrances. The mind becomes immersed in samadhi, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruption, pliable, workless, steady, imperturbable. And in that point, they project the mind and extend it towards the three knowledges or the six knowledges. So that would be seeing the past lives, seeing beings reborn according to their karma, and seeing that the mind is, especially seeing that the mind is freed from the defilements, and then making the declaration of this is the end of rebirth. That's one pattern. The other pattern is the spiral path. We studied this recently. So this starts, the preliminary to that path is either sila, or else having a clear conscience, or else acquiring faith, or else abandoning the hindrances. And then based on that arises meditation with the gladdening the mind, bliss and tranquility. So those three are the parts of this pattern that are about meditation. And then the parts of this pattern that are about insight or wisdom is yatha bhuta jnana dasana, seeing things as they really are, nibbida, becoming disillusioned with dukkha, and viraga, becoming the fading away of strong feelings and strong reactions, fading away of the attachment to bliss, fading away of all attachments, and then vimutti, freedom. And then the other pattern that we saw was a bojjhanga pattern, which is, all these patterns are somewhat sort of similar, like sort of overlapping. You can get on any one of these ladders will work for you. Whichever one you can understand, the one that inspires you, the one which is taught by the teacher in the school that you're part of. So cultivating the bojjhangas is given in the part of the Satipatthana pattern. It says a part of anapanasati. Those are said to be related to relinquishing the hindrances and developing the bojjhangas, the factors of awakening. And what are they? First, preliminary is that you heard the Dhamma and went to a secluded dwelling. That's the preliminary for the developing the bojjhangas. Then you remember the Dhamma and think it over. That's your sati sambhaj. Then you discriminate the Dhamma with wisdom. You examine it and investigate it with using your intelligence, using your mind, Dhamma vichaya. Then this is partly related to faith. You saw that it's true. You see that it's real. You see that this Dhamma is in accord with reality to the extent you can understand it. Then energy is aroused. You cultivate that energy without slackening. And based on this energy, this is energy for purification of the chitta. Then there arises piti, this is jhana. Then the body-mind becomes tranquil. That's passaddhi, that's also part of meditation. Then the mind becomes immersed in samadhi. And then within that samadhi, then one closely looks on with equanimity at the state of the mind or the nature of the mind. So that is, this version has got a very full development of the samadhi portion of the path. And then the Rathavinīta that we have now has got a fuller version of the wisdom part of the path. Just to wrap this sutta, this is sort of like the end of the framing story. When he said this, then Sariputta says to Puna, "What is the Venerable's name? How are you known among your companions?" He says, "My name is Puna. I'm known as the son of Mantani." And he says, and Sariputta praises him. It's incredible, amazing. He answered the deep questions point by point as a learned disciple who rightly understands the teacher's instructions. So recognizing him as a skilled disciple of the Buddha. And then saying this is very strange. It's very unusual. Sariputta is the Buddha's right-hand bhikkhu. And yet he's saying, oh, it's so fortunate that I get to see this Venerable and pay homage to him. It's quite interesting. And but then it comes to be mutual. Then Puna said to Sariputta, "What is your name?" And says, "Oh, my name is Upatissa. I'm known as Sariputta among my companions." And he says, "I had no idea I was consulting with Sariputta, the disciple who's fit to be compared with the teacher himself. If I had known, I would not have said so much." Instead, he would have just deferred and says, "It would be very good, sir, if you would give the answer to the questions." It's amazing. Venerable Sariputta asked deep questions. So then he says, it's so fortunate that he's able to see the Venerable and pay homage to them. So you have these two arhats having a cordial and agreeable conversation about the Dhamma, agreeing with each other, respecting one another, paying homage to each other. Just to, in case you hear some other Dhamma talks, the first insight is said by Buddhaghosa to be insight into the nature of Namarupa, or mind and matter, or often it's explained as having insight into the nature of the five khandhas and overcoming the personality view of finding self in a combination of the five khandhas, understanding the nature of the five aggregates, understanding conditionality, how this body-mind has arisen through previous karma, continues through their nutriments, but however, there's no self to be found as the owner or controller of the process, at least at the level of a reflective understanding of that. Then a stage of overcoming doubt is said to be by understanding dependent origination. And then understanding what is and is not the path is said to be especially, here's another common phrase in Dhamma, seeing the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of any Dhamma. So whatever you think you can hang on to, whatever you think you can depend on, whatever you think you can base your practice on, it turns out to be otherwise. So you see the attraction, but still you see the danger because of impermanence, and you see cessation. You see how those phenomena are ceasing. So in meditation, if you can see cessation, that's said to protect you from making a mistake about what is or is not the path. Then the purification of knowledge and vision of the practice, they associate with the three characteristics. And purification of knowledge and vision as itself is said to be enlightenment itself, the four stages, any of the four stages from stream entry to the conclusion. And then the final purpose, this extinguishment by not grasping. These, I can see why the commentarial explanations of this sutta are controversial. To me, the common sense explanations that I just gave you about progressive insight is more sensible, and it seemed like the commentators were trying to fit in the different Dhamma topics into a format and making the different Dhamma topics into a ladder. But to say this is a ladder and you've got to climb up this ladder, and it's not until you get almost to the next to the last step of the ladder that you get to find out about the three lakhana, the impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. It doesn't fit so well for me. I'm going to close by giving a much more simplified version of wisdom that does fit into the 7 stages, like the way he explained it. Sambe sankhara anicchati yada panyaya pasati atanim bindati dukkhe esamango visuddhiya. All conditions are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, okay, so that's impermanence, then one grows disillusioned with dukkha. That's the nibbida. That's the stage of turning away, losing interest, being willing to let go. Why are we still suffering? It's because we still want it. We're still holding on to suffering. That's why we still suffer. When we finally can see impermanence of all conditions and see it truly with wisdom, then we become disillusioned with dukkha. When we become disenchanted, disillusioned, when we see there's anything that's part of dukkha is not the answer, we lose interest And then it's possible to release and stop grasping after dukkha. And this is the path to purity, through seeing all conditions are impermanent, when seeing that all conditions are dukkha, seeing that with wisdom, becoming disillusioned with dukkha, seeing that all things are not self, seeing that with wisdom, becoming disillusioned with dukkha. This is the path to purity. Okay, so I'll see here if there are any questions. Welcome, Chintana, Yankee Apple, Mana, Gregory, Shohag, Bhumika, Agnami, Maitreya, Edward Clark, Sud. And here's finally we have a question from Sud. If we were meditating, trying to get our mind to be peaceful and to let go and practice, this only counts as purification of mind. But there are several steps still to go. Do we still have to actively seek out the next steps, or do they unfold by themselves? Good question. To my understanding, even before you began practicing meditation, making the mind peaceful, practicing metta, and purifying the mind in that way, you already had developed some kind of preliminary right view because you had heard Dhamma and you had pondered, investigated, and considered about the Dhamma. You had developed mindfulness, and you had practiced looking to see if it's possible to notice in meditation the arising and cessation of phenomena. So because of that preliminary work you've done, then while you're within the peace of meditation, the mind has an inclination that then the phenomena in their true actual nature will present themselves to you, and you will be able to recognize what you're experiencing. So you should not be forcing yourself and saying, okay, now the mind is peaceful, now I want wisdom, and trying to, but instead you got to like hold on to that peace, like at the culmination of the Bojjhangas. You've got that equanimity, the enlightenment factor of equanimity, which is the it's an ability to see, it's ability to evenly see, even balanced, without disturbance, to overlook and see all the phenomenon that's arising. So this is what you develop through your samadhi, through your meditation practice, and because of your training, you got that inclination, that tendency of the mind. You're not just going into a stupor, or not just letting the mind rest in a state of dullness, but instead you appreciate that quality which is both bright and also completely calm. And then with that state and with those preliminary factors being established, then the next step of the path will unfold naturally without having to be forced. Juan Pablo Hurtado asks, why is it said in other traditions that the Tathagata's liberation and nirvana is complete, while that of solitary realizers and hearers is similar and equal, but incomplete and inferior? So the word Samma Sambuddha means that our Buddha, the Tathagata, was perfectly enlightened. That's the Samma. And then Sambuddha means by himself. So he was awakened by himself. He didn't awaken by listening to another teacher. Instead, he awakened by himself through his own practice. The disciples that came afterwards, the arahants, who were called the listeners, also have a certain kind of perfection because they're practicing the Eightfold Noble Path, which is Samma, Ditti, Samma, Sankappa, and so forth. So each one of the steps and stages of the path is Samma, is perfect. So they're practicing perfect or complete. They're practicing the complete and perfect path, but they're practicing it as ones who are listeners who had the benefit of getting that initial conditioning of the mind by being in the presence of the teaching and listening to the teachings. So they were not enlightened by themselves. And then the other kind of a Buddha, the solitary realizer, it said, now, this is like in the Buddha's time, there were many hermits who were known to be Bodhi, or known to be awakened, that were referred to as a private Buddha, or a solitary Buddha. I don't believe that those Buddhas were like completely alone, that they never talked to anybody or never saw anybody. Instead, I think that they did have supporters and followers, or people who were bringing alms food, people who were listening to them, people who admired them, who appreciated them, who perhaps could recognize that they were awakened. But those awakened Buddhas were not able to enunciate the path of practice, to point it out and explain it, and to be able to do a transmission of the teaching such that through their words and through their speech, another individual is able to obtain the full awakening. So teaching is still perfect because they're awakened. That's why it's perfect, but they are not able to, they don't have the capacity of explaining what they're experiencing. Chintana says the Catholics have a catechism to follow. Is there anything to follow so directly in Buddhism? How do we teach and learn in Buddhism? Right. So, as a Catholic, as my understanding is one of the stages of being a member of Catholicism. I think this is when somebody takes their confirmation usually as a young teenager, but a child is old enough to think. Then they subscribe to a set of beliefs, to a credo. And all religions have this aspect of a certain definition of what the beliefs are that determine what is the true religion and what's a heresy, and what falls on the inside of the club and what falls on the outside of the club. In Buddhism, within the hundreds of years, up to the even as far as the 12th century, after the Buddha's parinibbana, the disciples of the Buddha fell into quarrels and disputes about their understanding of what the Buddha taught, and they developed different abhidhammas. which were kind of their arguments about why the way that they understood the teaching is the correct way, and the way that somebody else understands the teaching is not correct. And so during this unfortunate era of Buddhism, if you wanted to be a good Vibhaja Buddha, which is the precursor of the Theravada Buddhist, Vibhaja Buddhist, I think that's the term for it, you had to subscribe to the Theravada Abhidhamma. But if you were a Sarvastivada, you would subscribe to a different, they made the most, they had many different branches. They said to have 18 schools of Buddhism, but actually there was more than 18 different schools of Buddhism, and they had the most minuscule distinctions among them. And so it's part of human psychology, but this is not, in my opinion, what you need to be a good Buddhist. Instead, I think this is just a human tendency. In Buddhism, the way to be a good Buddhist is by the Patipada, not by subscribing to a particular defined credo. So you can't sign your name, say, I agree with, okay, Chintana, you're asking, you have a certificate, right? And what's in the certificate? The certificate does not say, I believe all things are impermanent. I believe all things are dukkha. I believe all things are without self. Instead, your certificate says, you undertake to practice the 8 precepts. So you've undertaken a set of practices which are the first steps or the launching point of the Patipada. So practicing that, and then practicing the purification of the mind, practicing meditation. That's the right way. I gave, just before I gave I showed you several different versions of the gradual training. All of those are different descriptions of the Patipada, of the way of practice. And you can take any one of them, one that makes sense, one that's useful for you, the one that you're able to practice with. Don't take the one that you're not able to practice with. Take the one that you are able to practice with, and practice with that. And by following that Patipada, that's the way to be a Buddhist. Okay, so I think that's enough. We've had a perfect talk in the sense of finishing before 9 o'clock. And we can close by all together saying, Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.